and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and today I am in a different place because I am dog sitting. But while I'm here, I really wanted to talk about a book that has taken me a really long time to read. I got it in mid-December, I think, was when the paperback release was, and I finished it in mid-February. So, Space Opera by Catherine Valente is a space opera. It's sci-fi, and it also has some flying through space on spaceships going on. I pre-ordered the paperback because I absolutely love Catherine Valente's work. She's amazing, and I've loved everything by her that I've read. This is no exception. However, it did take me a really long time to read, and at first I thought it was because of all the long sentences, which long sentences with big words that takes a while for one's brain to process is kind of normal for this author. But I digested her other books, which were for younger kids. They were middle grade books, the Fairyland series, quite a bit quicker. And so I finally realized that the reason I was reading this so slow was because it's just really dark, depressing, and sad, basically. But I still really liked it, and I'll tell you more about that in a little while. For now, I'll just say that it's worth it. So the premise of this book is that aliens are real, and there are a whole lot of them that are spacefaring, space voyaging, seafaring? Yeah, spacefaring. So they have had to figure out how to live with each other because they're all vastly different. Like, not just a bunch of different humanoids. They're a bunch of wacko creatures like collections of gases and globule things and moonbeams and all sorts of things like that. Also artificial intelligences, and one very interesting one is a zombie virus that has sentience and takes over the bodies of other dead aliens. So when you're talking to a zombie, you're not talking to the dead creature itself, you're talking to the bunch of germs living in it. Very weird, very, very Valente. But instead of going the routes that various other societies in sci-fi have gone and determining how they interact via negotiated treaties and wars and so on and so forth, all the spacefaring aliens at this time have figured out that the best way to get along is to have one way of deciding who and what is sentient or not, and then those people get rights, and everybody who doesn't count as sentient gets wiped out, so that they don't end up causing trouble and murdering all the other members. So, how do they decide who's sentient and who's not? Basically by their ability to create art, and not by the entire species' history of art that they've made, but by choosing a particular representative of a new species that has approached spacefaring abilities and taking them off to compete against other new species and all the other species that have ever survived the process. There are a fair number of rules, which are explained very well in the book, so I'll let you read them for yourself. Hey girl, what are you doing? Hi, what are you doing? What do you need, huh? What are you doing? Are we for going outside or are we for petting? Let's try going outside. Oh yeah, that's what we want. But the particular art that they are being tested on is performance art, which is a combination of music and also showmanship in various wacko ways that will also be explained in the book. Very out there and alien, and just like what you would imagine would happen if a bunch of aliens with crazy abilities that have vastly different anatomy than us decided to go all out like our biggest pop stars do for a performance, with the backup dancers and the vocalists and the special effects, etc. But all of that only takes up about half to 3/5 of the book. Approximately every other chapter is actually about the backstory of the particular people who've been chosen to represent Earth. This is the sad part. So, you find out in the first couple of chapters that the two main characters, Owart St. Ultraviolet and Decibel Jones, used to be part of a 3-person band, and that their band was very successful as a what's referred to as glam rock group. They wore extravagant outfits and had extravagant music. Actually, they remind me a lot of the vibes that Queen puts off. Now that right after I started reading this book, I watched Bohemian Rhapsody in theaters, and I was like, I've heard of this concept before. This is severely reminded me of Decibel Jones. I knew very little about Freddie Mercury and Queen before this, even though I have loved all their music. I just didn't know it was all by the same group. But anyway, glam rock is the name of their genre, and they were very successful until they lost their third member, Mira Wonderful Star. She died in a car accident. She swerved to avoid hitting an animal, and both Oart and Decibel feel like it's their fault to an extent, but especially Decibel, because it kind of was, because she went out driving in an emotional state after he had hurt her feelings. After that, they lost a lot of their spirit, and they didn't have a drummer anymore, and they dried up. Oart got married, had 2 kids. Decibel is just a washed up former star who tries to forget what happened. And as you go through the alternating chapters with what's going on now and what went on those years ago, you find out just how sad it is that Mira died because of how close they all were and what a wonderful thing they had together. And you find out more about the circumstances of why she got her feelings hurt and why things happened the way they did that night. And it's very sad. So also at first it was a little bit jarring because I didn't know what to expect. I had thought that the whole thing was going to be about modern day and going off to this competition and doing the competing, but actually you only get to the competition fairly late in the book, which quite frankly I probably should have known because a lot of what I've read by Valente so far has been a lot about the journey, less about the destination type questy things. And so it was odd going from that to this past that was all about the band, but I really liked both portions, so I didn't mind too much. I was just not sure what to expect as the story was progressing. And then also every once in a while we have a short chapter about how Earth as a whole is reacting to this whole mess. And one of the things that I like the most about sci-fi, and that I'm very used to in sci-fi because I watch Star Trek, Stargate, in all their iterations, Star Wars, etc., I'm very used to sci-fi being used to comment on the human condition and all sorts of social topics. And so the main ones that are addressed in this book are the nature of sentience, obviously. Also the nature of people who watch sports, and particularly violent sports, who like to see bad things happen, like watching gladiators or watching nasty reality TV, etc., and how it makes them feel better about their own condition when they see other people having problems. And so throughout all the sections of the book, Valente is commenting on how humans react to things and how people react to things, even these aliens, and how even though they're so different, some of the nature of sentience, I guess, is thinking that this is good or that is bad, and how they interact. It's fascinating. I, as usual, absolutely love all the crazy creatures that the author came up with. Her descriptions are the best ever. Those are where a lot of the long sentences come in, but also a lot of the long sentences are the commenting thing, which actually reminds me a lot of Jane Austen in the way that she writes just people doing their thing and living, but the way she writes it is very much making fun of what's going on, and I really love that. So, extremely creative, great social commentary, very enjoyable, lovable, yet flawed characters. Decibel's a bit of a ditz. But very lovable ditz. Oh, and there's a cat. I really like the cat. It's a good cat. But that's all I can really tell you before I get into spoilers. So this is going to be the slight spoilery section, and then I'm going to get into a more spoilery section later on that's like talking about some specific things that I had a reaction to. So these are going to be very light spoilers, basically about the overall arc of the story and like why it's okay that it's sad. So if you don't like sad books but you're thinking about trying this, you might want to watch this part. Basically, if you've ever seen a lot of anime, one thing that happens a lot, and the reason that I have to be emotionally prepared to watch an anime, is that the way they use emotions to really good effect, they make something, well, they tend to do a combination of both. Make something really happy and sweet and wonderful and meaningful so they can crush your heart when they destroy it. Or they make something really sad and terrible and horrible. Sometimes this is a progression, so it's like it was happy and really wonderful, and then they crush your heart and it's sad and it's really horrible and they make it the worst thing ever. And then they use having made it the worst thing ever so that when you come back up to things being good again, or things resolving or fixing or somehow being better, it's like the best thing ever. And so you've been on this roller coaster ride of great to horrible to wonderful, or just great to horrible, or just horrible to wonderful. It really wrecks your heart, but I find it is worth the horrible bit because of how that springboards you into the happy ending, which actually, if you've learned much of anything about Tolkien's theories about fairy tales and how darkness ought to be used in fairy tales, and like even if you've just read The Lord of the Rings at all, especially the last book, you'll know that he believed that that was important, that you can't appreciate things being good unless they've been really bad previously. So that is a big thing that happens in this book. The worst thing is how horrible everyone feels about losing Mira, and how that has basically wrecked these two people's lives, and how we're sad for Mira because we've actually gotten to know her ourselves and we wish that she was still around. And it's really sad, but then in the end, trying to walk the line between big spoilers and medium spoilers, but that sadness is used to springboard us into things being really, really happy and wonderful at the ending. So if you're a happy ending lover, would recommend. It's gonna be fine. Now we're getting to the full spoilery section. If you haven't read it, wouldn't recommend you watch this part, but I would like to just comment on how much I love the ending and some other bits that are interesting that I would want people to discover the first time for themselves. So I was starting to suspect, maybe 3/4 of the way through, that there's no way that all this backstory is just meant to be backstory. There's no way that Mira is staying dead. It was a mixture of actually thinking that that's the way it was going to be, and just really, really hoping, please don't leave me in this darkness, please bring her back. And so obviously that happened, and it was the best thing ever. Did I cry? Yes, I did. Let's start a little earlier on. So, you may know I am asexual, sex repulsed. Well, Decibel is described as being omnisexual. Omni is very much the correct descriptor, as he has sex with multiple aliens. And so because I was having a hard time getting through it, I decided to switch to audiobook. Unfortunately, was able to get it from my library. And the audiobook of Space Opera is actually read by Heath Miller, who is Catherine Valente's partner. They have a baby together. It's ridiculously adorable. And he has a gorgeous voice. And he does great impressions and accents. So I was listening to the audiobook during the scene with Des and Oart at the alien bar. And fortunately, there was quite a lot of warning that a sex scene was coming up. So I turned off the audiobook and went and got my print book because I really didn't want to listen to that read out loud. And it was weird alien sex, which was less horrifying than it could have been. My mom's read romances with a lot grosser alien sex in them. This was just hair brushing, so it's fine. But I'm still glad I didn't listen to it. But then after that, I switched back to the audiobook and listened to it for the remainder, and I loved it so much. He was so great at delivering all the epic lines that particularly come at the ending, so it was lovely. So I highly recommend the audiobook and the regular book. My internal narrator's pretty good at delivering Catherine Valente's lines, but I highly recommend any audiobooks that Heath Miller's done. He's excellent. I'll link both their Twitters below, as well as the book. Really beautiful and wonderful emotional roller coaster. Thank you so much for watching this review, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Bye!